Hello all, I'm excited to present our work from CHI 2024 to you, entitled Quantifying the Pollan Effect, Investigating the Impact of Emerging Psychiatric Interventions on Online Mental Health Discourse. So mental health conditions are increasingly common, with 1 in 2 people experiencing a mental health condition at some point over the course of their life. Many of these individuals will not find sustained or effective care. For example, in the US, 1 in 3 people have treatment-resistant depression, or depression that does not remit after 2 or more trials of medication. Treatment resistance has been demonstrated for a variety of mental health disorders, including depression, as mentioned, as well as eating disorders, anxiety disorders, and bipolar disorder. Now, in looking for solutions for individuals in need of lasting and effective treatment, researchers have turned to techniques first utilized as treatments for mental illness in the mid-20th century and earlier, including psychedelic therapy. In this modality of therapy, participants are made to take a psychedelic, so pictured here is a psilocybin therapy session, experience the effects of the psychedelic, and then debrief with the therapist afterwards. This research has shown to be quite promising for treatment-resistant mental health concerns. And as a consequence, popular media has covered psychedelic research for mental health concerns with a lot of enthusiasm, noting how depression could be eased with a single dose of magic mushrooms, or how psychedelic drugs could transform treatment for mental illness. In parallel, people online have also described their experiences using psychedelics, such as psilocybin-containing mushrooms, for a diverse set of mental and physical illnesses. But is this widespread use of psychedelics for mental health a consequence of popular media? Several theorists and researchers have argued that the answer is yes, noting that Michael Pollan's book seemed to have created a shift in how people see psychedelics. Rather than being a substance for leisure and introspection, researchers such as Pendse and Noorani argue that psychedelics have become part of a right-to-try social movement around access to what is viewed as a treatment for mental illness. Noorani theorizes that this movement was spurred on by Pollan's book, and thus dubs the potential effect of the book as the Pollan Effect. But can the Pollan Effect be further confirmed via patterns of online platform use? And what can discussions of psychedelic therapy on online platforms tell us about the formation, dynamics, and future of this broader social movement? In this study, we asked those very questions, utilizing matched Reddit posts from forums focused on psilocybin mushrooms to ask the following 3 questions. First, how do people in online communities describe their health conditions and the role that psilocybin-containing mushrooms, or PCMs, may play in alleviating symptoms? Next, how has the Pollan Effect influenced how people talk about PCMs broadly? And finally, how have discussions around PCMs and their use for health conditions shifted over time? We intentionally use the study of psilocybin mushrooms, or PCMs, as our psychedelic of study, as they are decriminalized in more jurisdictions than other psychedelics, and are thus more accessible in informal contexts for people to experiment with. To answer these questions, we begin by conducting a linguistic analysis of nearly 700,000 Reddit posts describing PCM use from 2012 to 2022. We then test to see if there's an increase in health-related language and changes in expression before and after 2 natural time points associated with the release of Michael Pollan's book. First, the release of his book on May 15, 2018, and second, a documentary based on the book on July 12, 2022. We utilize matched Reddit posts from PCM subreddits before and after these time points to test whether there was indeed a shift towards language indicative of a social movement around health. Now, before I delve into our methodological approach to finding and matching PCM-related posts, I also want to note that our work is not intended to replace clinical evaluation by a trained professional, nor does it constitute medical advice or guidance. Our findings must not be interpreted as clinical or medical guidance around the efficacy, validity, or safety of engagement with PCMs. But to start with, I will discuss our approach to data gathering and analysis. To detect health discourse, we collected all posts from a set of PCM-related subreddits from December 2012 to December 2022. Posts were similar to the above, though not always as explicitly clinical. Users would describe all sorts of experiences with PCMs in what were often called trip reports. To find posts that had health terms, as well as the health terms used in those posts, we used the Healthy Named Entity Recognition tool, which provided us with health language such as health conditions, as displayed here, physiological and symptom descriptions, medications that individuals may have taken, and other health terms. Additionally, to find the words most distinctly used in health and non-health related posts, we conducted analysis using sparse additive generative models of text, which modeled the most distinctly used words in two corpuses of text. We found the most distinctly used words in posts that contain various health terms and posts that did not contain those terms. Next, to measure the Pollan effect, we matched posts from before and after our 2 time points using a series of covariates to get the type of posts that were matching as close as possible. We found the most optimal matches across posts utilizing the Hungarian method with the Mahalanobis distance between posts. Our standard mean difference was quite low, and our average variance ratio was near 1, indicating a close match. We conducted this for PCM subreddits and then repeated the matching and analysis for posts from the top 100 subreddits as well, as a comparison sample, using the same covariates for matching here too. Finally, we introduced the concept of a Pollan shift. So in our last analysis, we looked at whether there were changes in the incidence of health terms, but it's also possible that the way that people talked about PCMs also changed over time, and in similar ways after Pollan's book release and his documentary release. For example, the person above describes how experiences with PCM have helped them cope better with past traumas and brought them hope. These are not explicitly health-related words, but could be indicative of changes in lived experience with PCMs and mental health. So to measure these shifts, we used psycholinguistic measures. More specifically, we use the Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count tool, or LIWC, to highlight these forms of subtle differences. For example, affect language, such as feeling much better or feeling excited or feeling a sense of hope, would be picked up by various dimensions in LIWC and allow us to understand if there are more subtle shifts in language before and after the release of Pollan's book and documentary. So using these analytic approaches, what did we find? I'll now move on to discussing our findings from our analysis. I'll briefly summarize our most key findings, though a full listing can be seen in the published paper. So looking to the question of whether health terms are discussed in PCM forums, we did find that health terms are abundantly discussed in the forums, and particularly mental health conditions and terms. This includes depression in 1.42% of all PCM-related posts, ADHD in 0.215% of all posts, and addiction in 0.176% of all posts. We also find that conditions newly under active study, such as chronic pain or fibromyalgia, are discussed in these forums, potentially indicating that information from the forums around experiences with PCM for these conditions could be useful for ongoing clinical research. Looking to the topics that are most discussed alongside health terms, we find a high discussion of lived health experiences, including experiences with therapy, experiences that may have helped or made things worse, and experiences with pain, alongside health conditions and symptoms. We also find that the posts that do not contain health language are largely centered around psilocybin mushroom cultivation, including discussions of contamination of mushroom grows. Now, moving to the question of whether we observe the Pollan effect, we do find a robust Pollan effect after our first time point or the release of Pollan's book. And you can observe this for health condition language in the graphic above, though we find it for all dimensions of health terms. However, we only observe a Pollan effect for language around physiological signs and symptom experiences after the film release. And this may hint at the book being more salient for social movements around PCM use and health than the related documentary was. It's also possible that this means that people did not change the level they spoke about health after the documentary release, but spoke about PCMs differently and in less explicitly health-focused ways. To investigate this question, we studied psycholinguistic shifts in language, or what we call Pollan shifts. And we found that there were higher levels of language around affect, positive emotion, feeling states, and religion after both the book release as well as the film release. And this may mean that after each, people were more inclined to describe their experiences taking PCMs for health, including connections to how they felt on an emotional and spiritual level. The effects of Pollan's science communication and media engagements may thus not strictly be limited to increases in health language, but around how people broadly share their experiences with PCMs. So together, these findings have implications for future movements, for policy reform around PCM use and health, for hypothesis generation in psychedelic science, and for the ability of platforms to encourage healthy and responsible discussions around PCM use for health. To elaborate, starting with policy reform, we found that while Michael Pollan's book significantly boosted awareness and advocacy for psychedelic therapy, his subsequent documentary did not as strongly replicate this impact, indicating the need for more influential flashpoint moments, like his book, that have a similar impact to the book for social movements around psychedelic decriminalization, destigmatization, and policy reform. We also demonstrate the viability of looking at shifts in language to measure whether a flashpoint moment was successful by comparing with the robust Pollan effect we found. Next, looking to hypothesis generation, our study suggests that personal experiences shared on online platforms around PCM use for a wide range of health conditions offer valuable insights for clinical research, especially for treatment-resistant illnesses. We recommend that platforms could facilitate future hypothesis generation grounded in lived experiences with PCM use by enabling users to input detailed health information when publishing a post about their experiences, which could inform future studies and policy reforms. However, it's crucial to ensure that user privacy and informed consent are paramount, given the legal issues surrounding PCM use. And finally, thinking about platform considerations, we observed robust discussions around the use of substances that do not yet have widespread clinical approval for the treatment of mental illness. Now, research has suggested that high levels of PCM use can potentially lead to health risks, such as cardiac issues or hallucinogen persisting perception disorder. To mitigate these risks, we suggest online platforms offer harm reduction information, especially during spikes in interest potentially triggered by influential media like Pollan's book. Together, these findings speak to rapidly evolving landscapes around PCM use for health. They highlight the crucial role of significant media events in shaping social movements for psychedelic therapy, and they demonstrate the role that HCI can play in supporting research in this space. I'll end by saying thank you to the many people who made this work possible. Please do feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or thoughts. Thank you.